Well, joined now by the official Racer Insider Lindy Suiter as we go through our top 20 players in Murray State basketball history as voted on by the Racer Nation. And before we get to number 19, number 20, Lamont Sleets. And Lindy, you didn't have much to say, but you had thoughts that Lamont probably should have been a little higher on the board than number 20.
Yeah, I would think Lamont. Of course, for some reason, Jeff, it seems like there's about three eras where the players that were really good seem to be underrated, recognized or whatever. And of course, it starts with that going back to the Cal Luther years when you had Les Taylor, Claude Burden, Dick Cunningham, and those guys, which were really, really good players, but you don't hear a whole lot of talk about them. I mean, Dick Cunningham, 10 years in the NBA, backed up Lou Alcindor. Les Taylor, in my opinion, one of the top players, maybe the best player that's ever put on a uniform. And then you've got the Ron Green era, where you've got Lamont Sleets, Glen Green, Gary Hooker, Ricky Hood. I mean, those guys seem to be in a little forgotten era. And then Coach Anderson with Cuthbert Victor, James Singleton, and that crew. But yeah, I thought Lamont Sleets, he's definitely one of our all-time greats. If you ask Benny Purcell, he would tell you that Lamont Sleets definitely belonged in the top 10 or 12.
Well, number 19 on the board is Glen Green, the pride of Henderson, Kentucky, who played alongside Lamont Sleets. Before we talk about Glen, I want to talk about the era leading up to his arrival on campus as he comes in year number 2 of the Ron Green era, coming off a 4-22 season in that 78-79 year. But that was the end of a 6-year run with 5 losing seasons. Really before this machine really got chugging here for the last 4.5 decades. What, looking back at young Lindy Suiter, what were the mid to late 70s like as a Murray State fan?
Well, a good thing about the mid to late 70s, the Lindy Suiter was turning about 18 or 19 years old. Okay. And so I had some other things going on that was pretty important in my life. And I took advantage of those 4 or 5 years.
Sure.
And then, of course, there wasn't a lot of emphasis. And I know this sounds kind of strange, but Fred Overton had come off of a year where I think he was OVC Coach of the Year. And that was coming off of the Les Taylor years, the last years of Cal Luther. And there was kind of, there wasn't a lot of emphasis being put on basketball. In fact, Coach Overton was living over kind of in the student housing there behind the old baseball field. So, and then the administration made a change. And when they did, they brought in Ron Green. And Ron Green kind of changed the whole thing. It was more of a, he really thought big. He always did. And that's kind of when I think the program was kind of saved.
Yeah. So his first year, 4-22, just kind of resetting the deck. And then here comes Glen Green. Here comes Lamont Sleets, Ricky Hood eligible for Mississippi State. What do you remember about your first impressions when you're able to tear yourself away from the ladies of Glen Green?
Glen Green was just a smooth player. I mean, but he had a lot of great players around him.
Yeah.
He had the big shot against Notre Dame, which is the signature victory that kind of put us, on a different level of thinking amongst college basketball fans. But just a real cool customer. Never did kind of remind you a little bit of Jeff Martin, actually. Kind of similar games, not overly athletic, just very smooth, very good shooters, and always come through in the clutch.
Win an OVC championship that freshman year for him in 1980, and coming off this drought, if you will, through the late 70s, and like, holy cow, we've tied for a championship and end up going to the NIT that year. But what do you remember just about you go 5 or 6 years today at Murray State without a title, and everybody is losing their minds a little bit. But when you back in that era, you finally are able to cut down the nets again. What was the excitement level around Murray?
No, the excitement level was high. In fact, we hosted an NIT game. Wake Forest came into Racer Arena, and it was a huge game. They actually ended up beating us, but they had a heck of a team. But, one of our great teams right there was a team that had Beta Martin on it. And Vada Martin was a 6'7", 6'8" forward that played a key piece on our team when we went down and won the UAB Classic. With Gene Bartow was the coach, and Tom Penders was the coach at Fordham, and I think we beat them by about 30, and then we beat UAB in the championship game. And then after Christmas, Vada was ruled ineligible. And, that team right there was very special. But yeah, everybody was excited, of course, having NIT hosting it at home, Wake Forest, ACC team coming in. So yeah, the excitement level was high.
In the pre-internet days, pre-social media, obviously, I mean, Glen's coming from up the road at Henderson County. He's honorable mention All-State, and 21 points, 15 rebounds, and to bring him in, was there any? I guess even in the pre-Racer Insider days, I mean, did anybody have any idea who Glen Green was when he rolled into Murray? Was there any just, hey, maybe we saw him play somebody from West Kentucky on the high school ranks, or was it he might as well have been from Mars?
Actually, he was overshadowed by the other guys on the team, Jeff.
Yeah.
I knew about him. I kept up with him. I knew he was a good player, but we were so excited about having we had just come off, we had Gary Hooker, we got Ricky Hood, we got transfers from the SEC. We were pumped up about them. And then Lamont Sleets, I think he was an All-State, first-team All-State player when he signed with us. So Glenn was he was kind of overshadowed during that time when he came in, and actually – being a player of the year, he's probably, I think, wasn't he a player of the year one year?
1983, senior year.
1983. So, heck of an accomplishment. But like I said, there's several players during that era, like those three eras, that I think, and for whatever reason, I don't know if it was because there was no really set way on how you retired numbers, how you put, folks in the Hall of Fame or whatever. But, there's several guys that got overlooked.
December 7th, 1981, South Bend, Indiana.
Yeah.
Murray State 56, Notre Dame 54. In sort of the, I've been around almost 25 years now, and and I've always said that yes, Murray State beat NC State back in 1988 in the NCAA tournament, but it felt like a lot of ways that before the Vanderbilt fuse lit, and now we're winning games a lot in March, it felt like the most impactful game, and maybe historically in Murray State history at that time, was being a 16 seed and losing in overtime to Michigan State. Like, that was almost kind of the claim to fame nationally of, hey, Popeye Jones, this is great, and man, you were so close as a 16, and that never been done. But this game in 81 against Notre Dame, that was the pelt on the wall, right?
Yeah.
For a long time for this program.
Yes, it was exactly what the program needed, Jeff. I mean, Ron had come in, he had been at Mississippi State, SEC Coach of the Year, came in to make this program a powerhouse in the mid-major basketball. And of course, that right there, that's what he was shooting for. And when he was able to pull that off, I think that's when it all started. In fact, I think the first Hoopalooza that we had, I spoke at, and I looked at all the banners in the background. And I says, you start with that one with Ron Green right there. And if he hadn't come in and changed the direction of the program, none of the rest of the banners would be hanging right now. And I really believe that. And you can go back to that Notre Dame game.
He had 15 points that night. Up to, at the end of the game, John Paxson, the former Chicago Bull, missed a jumper, and an offensive rebound by a dude named Barry Spencer at the rim, and Glen Green blocks it at the buzzer, and the Racers get out of Dodge. And just sort of the famous media guide picture, which will be there forever, of the scoreboard running out of that arena that night, 56-54. Were you there?
I was not there, Jeff, but
Was your dad there?
I have the guests, and I have the VHS tape upstairs.
So it was on TV.
I do.
How about that?
VHS tape upstairs, thanks to Ron Green, actually. He gave me about 3 ball games. One of them was an Alabama NIT game. One of them was that game. Yep, sure do. I've watched into that game several times. In fact, that's kind of what started my collection. I've got probably about 250 games on video that I've transferred a lot of them over to DVD. Now they tell me I need to transfer them to DVD. So I don't know. Somebody will have fun with them one day, I guess.
When
look at him,
just a stud, 6'6".
Yep.
Thin, played a lot of positions, could run the point, played some wing, obviously, able to get down low and and blocked some shots as well. His junior year, that junior season, as the Racers went on to win another tie for another OVC championship, he led the team with assists. Had 4.9 assists per game that year, as well as leading scorer at almost 15 a night. What do you remember of him as a passer and his ability to be able to just have really that all-around game, not just being a scorer?
Yeah, he could. Yeah, he was. That's what I'm saying. In modern day basketball, he would really be thought of a whole lot more probably than he was at the time. But that just goes back to how smooth he was, Jeff. He was so smooth. He could do everything, really. He was long. He could shoot. He had the mid-range game. Like you said, he could pass. He just had he had a really high basketball IQ.
When you look at his progression, 9.5 points as a freshman, 10.5 points as a sophomore, and then to have him go 15 as a junior, almost 20 there as a senior, and be, again, with Lamont Sleets, right, and whoever's Batman, whoever's Robin, it seemed like two Batmans in a lot of way. But how did you see him and remember him really just evolving into maybe less of a piece to now being really one of the main cogs in the wheel that helped push this team to another and an outright championship in 1983?
Yeah, they had three of them. I mean, they really did. They had three guys. I mean, a lot of times when you look at a team, you're looking at two, maybe. If you got Vincent Rainey and Marcus Brown, you got Jeff Martin and Donnie Mann. You can go on and on. But what really made that special team, and maybe you had Glen Green, you had Lamont Sleets, and I think you had Ricky Hood. You had all three of them. And so, I still think, and I go back, and, those years are when we were just starting. And like I said, I'm just, at that time, I'm 24, 25.
Of course.
I still I don't have the Racer Insider going just yet, Jeff. But, yeah, he was, he got better every year.
OVC Player of the Year, 1983, win an OVC championship. Finally shared a couple with Western, finally able to beat them. And just for the folks that, again, it feels like, we're generations removed now from when it was just a blood feud between the Racers and the Hilltoppers, and they've gone on to multiple conferences since after leaving the OVC. And, now it's Belmont. It really was P for the longest time. What was that Murray State, Western Kentucky rivalry like when it was at its heyday?
Oh my goodness. I mean, it was at a whole different level, Jeff. I mean, a whole different level. I mean, going back to the 60s, my dad taking me over there to EA Dill Arena and having the car towed after the game and, all kinds of stuff. But no, that rivalry was in fact, that the crazy thing about that 4-win season, I think 2 of them were against Western.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, but anyway, it was a rivalry that, second to none. In fact, I will say to this day, the greatest basketball game event that I've ever been to was a Murray Western game. And I can't give you the exact date, but I know early 70s, Les Taylor, Jim McDaniels, I think they were ranked 4th in the nation. We were around top 25 at that time. And, beating them at the buzzer, I think, was probably the greatest game that I've ever witnessed.
To your point about changing the culture, I talked to Lamont Sleets a couple of years ago when Glenn had passed away, and that was the thing he said. He said, quote, "We changed the culture," and to your point of not only changing the culture, but save the program.
Yeah, save the program. I mean, Coach Green, we had a coach's show. We were having things that we just didn't have around here, Murray. He was out promoting the program, and you know how Coach Green was. He thought big. I mean, he's thinking big the whole time, and he knew he had a special team, and probably heartbroken and probably a little bit unrecognized. I'm finally glad he has gotten the Hall of Fame. I think in the past 10 years, that was something I thought should have been done a long time ago, personally, but was, never making it to the NCAA tournament here and having a team that could have made noise if they'd have gotten the NCAA tournament. And, of course, back in those days, I'm not for sure they had that many teams going to the NCAA. Right. Now too, but getting beat by, I think it was Joe Jakubic at Akron in the first round when we were hosting the OVC tournament that year. That was a real heartbreaker, and that kind of I'm sure that stuck in Coach Green's craw the whole time. He never got us to the NCAA tournament.
During that 4-year run, you talk about the culture changing. 81-34 was the overall record.
Yeah.
44-12 in the Ohio Valley Conference, and 3 regular season championships. I know a lot of people think, I mean, again, I think a lot of it is generational, whether it's, Murray State basketball began when Denaro Thomas hit a shot, or when, hey, maybe we won't beat NC State in 1988 or Popeye Jones, but it is hard not to, and not to discredit what happened back in the 60s with Coach Luther, but this was kind of the real, the jet fuel got added to this program during that 80 to 83 window there, right?
That's right. And Coach Luther had it at a peak. I mean, playing Marquette and Al McGuire in the NCAA tournament. In fact, that was my first one. My dad took me to that. It was in Carbondale. And then, like I said, we had that little lull right there where we things didn't work out, and the program was not being funded properly. And the administration, I think we had a change. And thanks to Marshall Gordon at the time, he was able to, Coach Green, come in and save the program. I mean, like I said earlier, I mean, just absolutely saved the program.
Do you take any responsibility in that 5-year lull that you were more focused on girls at that point instead of Murray State basketball? That maybe if you had maybe prioritized things a little bit better and been more focused on Racer basketball, we wouldn't have had that 5-year lull, Lindy. Because when look, you've got your lovely wife, you've got the kids and grandkids and everything now. Everything's great now. It's like maybe some of this is on your shoulders.
Yeah, but how about those poor girls? I mean, what if I'd have focused on the Racers? I mean, they would have, who knows what would have happened to them today.
That is true.
Without my positive influence in their life.
Positive influence, indeed. Indeed. My last question, Glen Green.
Yeah.
1,540 points, 13th all-time, 629 rebounds, 24th all-time, 423 assists, 5th all-time. That is on top of, oh, by the way, a player of the year in the conference. Oh, by the way, 3 regular season championships and banners hanging from the ceiling at the CFSB Center. How do you think he needs to be remembered by the Racer Nation?
As a winner. I mean, as a winner, and a guy that did it in a way that you just didn't really notice, Jeff. I mean, he was very quiet basketball player. Did not show a lot of emotion, just went out and did his job. But, a winner. Underrated. Both of the guys that we've talked about, Lamont Sleets and Glen Green, and the voting. Of course, you would expect that because today's social media voting or whatever is going to be, people probably never even watched those guys play. A lot of the people that voted. And so, and that's one thing about Murray State. You could go through the 60s decade and even the 70s, the 80s, and you could take the top 10 players in those decades, and there's a lot of schools that would be their top 10 of all time. And I'm not exaggerating one bit, because if you sit down and try to put down your top 10, I mean, it's tough. But I would say both of those guys should be recognized, I think, as top 15 players.